All right, hi, and welcome to my walkthrough of my virtual learning space. I'm going to explain a little bit what I've done here and do a brief walkthrough. I'm not going to have time to go through everything that this website contains, but I'll do my best. This is a wiki space designed to help and to aid and to organize and to help a class plan and ultimately write a novel. Now that might seem like quite an undertaking for an entire class to write a novel, but this is an idea I've played with for a while. Full disclosure, I've never actually done this. Maybe at some point I'll be brave enough to try this in my teaching career, but at least I know now that the website exists. But this would be about, it's really hard to say, but if I had to add it up in my head, I would say probably an 8 to 10 week unit. So you'd have to devote at least an entire quarter to doing this, if you're going to do it well. And maybe you can do it in 8 weeks, but we'll see. On the very first page here, the home page, you can see here the design. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. But it's got a title, Our Class Novel. And I kind of outlined very briefly the steps that we would go through. So let me just go over some of these steps and a little bit about how long it would take, and then I'll show you the resources and some of the other different pages that are over here on the left. All right, so let me see if I can zoom in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. All right, so the first step obviously is brainstorming, planning, at least getting a very general plan of the plot. And I think that would be done, first small groups of students brainstorming and then kind of reporting back to the class. And then again, the same thing with the plot, people sort of planning a rough outline of the plot, reporting back to class, and everyone sort of, I guess, democratically agreeing at least on what's our theme, what's our basic plot, and really probably not much beyond that. I'm thinking a couple of class periods for that, 2, maybe 3. The second would be to form the initial committees, and I have several committees listed here. I have a plot committee, and they're responsible for a more detailed version, a more detailed summary of the novel, chapter by chapter. And then there would be a committee in charge of the characters, and they would be in charge of planning each character, describing each character, characterizing essentially. There would be a setting committee, and obviously their job would be to kind of pick the time, describe the time and the various places and the various settings that our novel would utilize. And then the two sort of different types of committees here. I think there would need to be a research committee so when some of these other 3 committees would need some sort of research about something, they would be able to provide that. They might also be in charge of continuity and creating a sense of continuity between among these other 3 committees, in case one committee is going off in a direction that's really not related to the other 2, then they could inform them of that. So they'd have sort of that bird's eye view, and ultimately too, this committee would also be in charge of editing the various chapters. So that comes later. Then I think that you'd have to have a group of students who are sort of runners. And so they will, basically sit in with various groups and act as messengers as they bounce back, and they would bounce back and forth between, from the plot committee, the character committee, to the research committee, and get information as they need it, and so communication can happen. Now, obviously, this could all happen online as well, but I exist in a building where lab space sometimes is hard to come by, so I don't foresee this happening so much in a computer classroom, but with a classroom that would have access, maybe 4 or 5 computers in the room. It's probably the kind of environment where this would happen. So that would create a need for this running committee. All right, the third step then is actually writing the novel. So then you would break up into smaller groups of 2 or 3, and each group would be in charge of one of the chapters. And to keep things easy, I've decided we're going to write a 10-chapter novel. So there'd be 10 groups of students. Each group would be in charge of one of the chapters, and they would base their they're writing on what the plot committee came up with, what the character committee came up with, what the setting committee came up with, and they would use all that information as they write their particular chapter. Again, there would be a separate committee. Not everybody would be involved in writing a chapter. There would be this committee up here, the research committee. They would also be editing as these groups are writing these chapters. And again, they would also be in charge of making sure that there's continuity among the various chapters. And then ultimately we would like to publish the novel, maybe through something like Lulu, but there's so many nowadays, it's so easy to self-publish. There's all kinds of venues for doing that. So if you want a more detailed description of what I just described, the very bottom here, this link here, hopefully you can see it. Let me see. Yeah, this link here. Let me back up just a little bit. There it is. This link here it says Project Overview. Click on that, and it would take you to a UBD, an Understanding by Design lesson plan, where it has all the standards and the goals, and describes all the basis and the reasons and the why we're doing all this, and then it has a much more detailed description of what this process would look like. So I recommend you go there if you want a more detailed description. All right, what's over here now on the left? Let me back up just a little bit. You have, let me see if I can zoom in on that left taskbar here. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, so over here you have links for the different, first of all, the different committees: the plot committee, the character committee, the setting committee, the editing committee, and then a page for helping students write their chapters, and then places where the different rubrics that I'm going to use for assessment. So. All right, so if you click on this, let's click on the very first thing we're going to be doing is brainstorming and sort of getting a general outline. And again, I would see this as a couple of class periods. So this takes us to a page entitled Brainstorming. And as you scroll down, you can see there are different links for things that students can consider as they're brainstorming a novel. So here's a page from how to brainstorm short story and novel ideas, so students can read that. And then here's a link for it says more considerations, and so this takes us to an article entitled Getting Started Writing Your Short Story or Novel, and how to get started. And it talks about webbing and outlines and free writing. And these are all activities that we can, depending on how much time you want to take, that you can do. There's also graphic organizers to help us. And Mind 42 would be a great way to kind of just sketch out as a class just a real basic plot, And so you'd use something like, let me back up here so you can see this, Mind 42 to do that. It's a great 2.0 tool if you haven't used it. Even as we're brainstorming, we're going to have to think about what point of view our novel is going to be written in. So I've included a PowerPoint and uploaded from AuthorStream on point of view and what that looks like. So quite a bit of information here about the different types of point of views and the benefits and why you would pick that point of view. And then even thinking about, as we're brainstorming, getting a general idea of what our conflict is. And so this is just a description. There's a page here it's actually from musictherapy.at, but it's a great page. It just kind of lists all the different conflicts that a novel can take on, and again, the advantages of each. So, yeah. All right. So that's the brainstorming page. And so each page is sort of set up in this way. The students are given resources that I would expect them to utilize as they kind of complete whatever tasks. And so if they're on the plot committee, for example, they click on the plot page, and again, more resources. So here's this from that same page, but there's a really great description of how to, what to think about as you're structuring a plot. And there's more resources here. Actually, this might be a dead link. Nope. More descriptions of what we need to think about as we're structuring a plot. All right, and then ultimately the plot committee is going to use something I created on Google Docs. It's a form that then when they submit it at the bottom, well, actually if they scroll down here, you can see that submit button right there. When they submit it, it goes to a place where everyone can have access to it. And so if they're on the plot committee, they're going to have to basically give a very brief overview of each of the 10 chapters as they see it. And so they click on here and they'll click chapter 1, and then there's they have to fill in a 10 to 12 sentence summary of the chapter, and then what's the central event of the scene, and so they would describe that, and then they would identify which characters would be involved, and they would have to describe the events that take place during this chapter, and how does it affect the rest of the plot, and at what point does this chapter occur? Is this part of the introduction? Is this part of the rising action? Is this part of the climax? Is this part of the denouement? And then they click submit, and well, it's not going to do it for me, but it takes you to a repository of all, a place on Google Docs where all these forms will be saved. Okay, and anyone can have access to them. So the same thing when they click on for the character committee. There's resources to help get them started. There's a video here. Oh, sorry, that was taken down. But here's a video from Joyce Carol. It's giving a talk on how she creates characters. But they would also be expected to use the separate link here to give the different committees, particularly the people writing the chapters, visuals of what some of these characters might even look like. Maybe the character reminds them of Norman Bates or the Unabomber or whatever, so they could put visuals up there of what the character looks like. Again, they would have a form to fill out that would go to Google Docs to give their character name, identify how much of the novel does this character participate in. They would write a brief overview of the role this character will play. They list the scenes that they see this character taking part in. The height, the physical characteristics of the character, a description of their personality, how sympathetic the character is, what motivates this character, a little bit about their history, how we're going to find out about this character's thoughts. Is it going to be third person? It's going to be first person. Describe how they talk and their manner of speaking. Again, they click submit. It goes to the Google Docs, and everyone has access to it. Now, you might be wondering, okay, as the plot committee is designing, planning out each chapter, and the character committee is planning out each character, and they're doing this simultaneously, well, how are they communicating with each other? And again, there is a committee devoted to running back and forth between the various and communicating, making sure that there's continuity and there's consistency among these committees. So if you click on the setting committee, again, you have your resources. Here's a great author stream PowerPoint on the importance of setting and the different choices they have and why setting is important, and the roles that setting can take in a narrative. And this group, again, I've given them a blank page and here's just some examples, but to provide some visuals of the setting and what the setting might look like, or they can put up maps or even draw maps and scan them in and put those on that page, and so everyone has a really good sense of the various settings that this novel. And then again talking about time period and maybe even researching the time period. Again, that's what that research committee can help them with, is we want to know more about the 1820s in London, so that the research committee would help them find information about that particular time period. And again, they're going to fill out this form for each of the various locations, so they give the location a name, they describe key visual or physical features of this place, describe the mood, the psychological qualities of this place, and then they give geographical information, cultural information, and then how is this setting going to affect our characters, and they describe that just on this form, for each of the various settings of the novel. And saying again that once they submit that, it goes to the Google Docs, everyone has access to it. The editing committee, again, this is primarily, there's not a lot of resources here. This is a form that they're going to fill out, and this is really for, at first, they're going to function more as a fact-checking body when the character setting and plot committees are meeting and planning. They're going to, as they submit and as they upload to their various forms, this group will be fact-checking the things that they come up with. Now, once these committees are done, the next step, as we talked about, would be for each committee to sort of present to the class, even after the class has looked over the forms and things that they've submitted. And I just imagine this is just basically organized chaos, but people debating, just making decisions, you know, what needs to be changed, but making sure that you know, everything's pretty much in place, the plot, the characters, the setting, everything, basically everyone's satisfaction. And once all those things are decided upon, then everyone sort of is ready to write the chapters. And so the same people that were in the plot, character, and setting group would then be divided up into 10 small groups, and each group would be in charge of one of the chapters. And again, there's resources here for how to write dialogue. There we go. What is dialogue used for? What it looks like, how it's indented. There's a discussion here of how to keep continuity in a novel. And so things they need to think about, things they need to check over, things they need to consider to make sure that there is continuity. There's some resources here about using sensory description in a novel to paint pictures in the reader's heads. There's more resources here on using sensory description. Sorry, these links are taking a while to. Again, tips for capturing sensory experiences. Here's a link about, you know, just common problems, and it divides up into 4 problems that young writers often fall into. And so these are some problems. It just gives them a description of some problems they need to avoid. Here's a page on pacing and what it means, how to pace action well, and how to do it the right way. So that's something else they can read. And then here's something on being careful not to explain too much and you know, showing versus telling kind of issues. All right, so I imagine, you know, they can probably, again, using our Google Docs, the word processor on Google Docs, each group would be in charge of one of the chapters. Again, you would still have our editing group, and as chapter groups are uploading or submitting pieces of their chapter, the editing group is editing as they're going. They're also making sure that continuity is being maintained. And so for whatever they submit, whether it's part of a chapter or a whole chapter, the editing group would fill out this form, and it, you know, which chapter is being edited. They would rate the quality of the chapter. They would talk about problems with continuity that this chapter might present, because they have, again, they're the group that has that bird's eye view of everything going on. There's also, it says identify moments, scenes in the narrative where there needs to be more development. And then there's even a place for mechanical issues and things like transitions and point of view problems, verb tense problems. There's also a place where they can talk about the pacing. How can the pacing be fixed? So when they submit that goes back to that group who's working on that chapter, so they can make the necessary changes to their chapter. All right, something else that's a possibility, and I'm not sure. I did find this open source tool. It's called Storybook. I'm not sure I'm crazy. I kind of like using Google Docs, but this might be work better.